without any further ado, we'd love to hear where you all are at and kind of what came out of your small group discussions. No particular order. Feel free to just share as you are ready to share.
I'm happy to start. We talked about how to our organizations, how do we justify to them our membership in GRLI? And these are the things that came out. So there's the network, and that impacts us personally, but it also provides a network of resources and a network of people should we need to connect some of our faculty to or whatever. And it's a global network, which is just really, gosh, where else do you get that? And then there is, it can be looked at as leadership development because there is some really profound personal impact and lots of ideas. We listen to what one another is doing, and it really spans quite a range. And with that, you know, something like very concrete, like this collaborative course that Wayne has championed and many people have participated in. Those were the highlights. Does anyone want to fill in?
Well, I think it might be useful to add my perspective, which is kind of slightly different because, you know, I don't come from a higher institution, a higher education institution as such. You know, we've had a very interesting year as associate members. And before that, I was an individual member. But I think that the reason, first of all, the reason for us joining was that it gave us an opportunity to see how, if and how the leadership development work that we've done over the years could be expanded through higher education, in that, you know, we are a fairly small organization that can only do so much, and thinking from the greater good point of view, you know, leadership development, we need a lot more good leaders, and it has to come through higher education in some way or other. So that's just the background. But having said that, I mean, we've been kind of in learning mode over the last year or two. Apart from Claire, I don't think I've met anybody personally, so I'm a wholly remote networker in this context. But I think there's just one thing that I'd like to mention from this sort of different perspective, and that is that you know, you're very much a dean's club, if you like, in a way, or have been. That's the way it was set out. That's the way it was discussed, and you've all sort of been like sort of peer coaching each other, peer mentoring each other. And very successfully, it would seem, from everybody's feedback. But at the last meeting we had, the discussion was about how to diversify the strategic partners. And I just wonder if that's going to happen, how that's going to change the model. If you bring in from people from different levels of education, you bring in corporate partners, you bring in students, or whatever it is. How is that going to impact on the things that what I'm hearing people hold dear in the interpersonal relationships that they've developed, and can get ideas and suggestions and help and guidance from each other about what they actually do. So that's just my sort of perspective.
John, anyone else from that group that wanted to add? Maybe from the other group, anyone else?
I'll have a go from the other group if you want.
Thanks, Mark.
I'm sure. I'm sure somebody else will chip in. Actually, following just from the last comment, we talked about, we didn't have any neat answers. We talked about the somehow tension between inclusivity and exclusivity. So inclusivity in that we extend to, with the events that are not only for Dean, that include lots of other include other actors in the school that might be more, as Anne said, more doers than conveners, in the sense of deans versus associate deans or other heads of programs, etc. But also inclusive in terms of the sense of more people from representatives of schools in emerging economies and those that might benefit from the online environment. And then the exclusivity that I felt when I came to my first meeting in Antwerp, but then all of you, many of you have known each other for a long time, you have the benefits of that exclusivity, because you have those personal bonds that make it a very rich network and deep network for people in that in this space. My personal opinion is there's still a space for a dean's or senior leadership type space only, but that doesn't have to be the defining structure, and it could be something that happens once a year rather than or very more rarely, whereas more inclusive the other way. But also, as I said at the AGM the other week, and following John's comments just now about being more inclusive of emerging economies, I think that is our responsibility, the G and the R of GRLI, I would say, to bring on people from countries outside the northern Western hemispheres, and from as Romina said, in our group, for those people for whom $1,000 to travel is just out of the question. So thanks.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to what Mark said, and it's interesting, of course, that we touched on some of the same issues, not surprisingly, right, as we look across the groups that we hit on some of the same issues. But it kind of gets to this question of, are we talking about the Deans and Directors cohort? Are we talking about GRLI more broadly? And what is the right level of inclusivity and the right dimensions on which we are inclusive across the different groupings that we have, right? And so, if there is value in having a Deans and Directors senior leadership kind of cohort, that doesn't mean that we can ignore other, yes, that is exclusive, but that doesn't mean we can ignore the other dimensions of inclusivity that we should be considering, like having a broader range of schools from a broader range of economies as part of it. And how do we structure it? What can we do, right? So like Romina was bringing up the point of, some of the schools that she's worked with in East Africa, who just were like, yeah, we can't do that, right? That's just not an option for us, that kind of money. So, is it a combination of in-person and virtual things? Is it finding resources for us to support people from other schools to come and be part of the in-person, right? We talk over and over and over about how important the in-person opportunities are. Can we find a way to make those in-person opportunities more available to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to come, whether it's by locating the meetings near them, where it reduces the costs? Is it, ways of us supplementing, having a partner? Where, and again, sometimes within our structures, as a state institution, we're limited in how we can spend our money. But are there ways that we could do that to support other people being part of the organization?
Thanks, Anne. Kathy, you unmuted. Were you about to add something to that? Oh.
I just wanted to. I just wanted to share. We also talked about the fact that the in-person gatherings, there's something very, very special that happens there, and Hanalena kind of expressed it as, the first part of it is stopping down. We get in there and then we kind of settle, and Claire does all these magical things to help us let go of our normal trappings. And then we have this this very open mind and spirit and creativity, and that we share with one another. And then we would plan, we would make action plans that we would then take home and do stuff. And we talked about the fact that we have done some ideation online, but it's hard to have the same effect when you can't do that in-person magic that happens just because of the way the cohort is organized, the time, the flow of experience. So we're really hoping we can do that again, because it's very, very precious.
Some really interesting feedback that we maybe I can just quickly share something about what I'm observing here, if I'm hearing this correctly. The lines between the cohort and the, call it the broader GRLI, has become more blurred, I think, over time. So the courageous conversations that we've recently kicked off, the partner pods that we started at the beginning of 2021, the AGM, which of course we have every year and in a different kind of format, that's kind of whole GRLI and beyond. Whereas the cohort started off as a small group of GRLI deans, inviting other deans, non-GRLI deans, to join them for cohort gatherings, and that kind of then grew. And so the experience of some of you may be that you were like John Knight, you were just saying, you were an independent associate who became an associate partner institutionally and then joined the cohort. So you have a very different kind of experience of the GRLI, as maybe from the angle of it being a kind of a dean's club that's now expanding, whereas it was actually always a little bit bigger, I guess, than just the dean's group. And then again, some of you may have, as Kathy just said, experienced the in-person meetings, which Anders and Claire and I are fully aware it's very difficult to kind of recreate that online. And maybe, just to what Mark was saying, maybe what the let's call it the deans only cohort, and this is not about exclusivity, this is about that space where the deans who wish to meet with other deans to talk about dean stuff goes. Maybe that is in time something different than what we have now as the deans cohort. Maybe, sorry, I'm just thinking aloud here, but maybe the kind of the activity that the sharing of learning, the initiatives like this Gateway initiative with the shared module, etc., that's kind of becoming whole GRLI initiatives. It's no longer just contained to the Dean's cohort. So maybe we need to think differently about that. But I'm just thinking aloud and just kind of playing back from what I'm hearing. But let me stop there because I want to hear more from all of you. Sorry.
Or what I hear you say, John, being very, very frank, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Deans and Directors cohort as originally intended is not possible until we can meet in person.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Be interesting to hear if that has any resonance for people who were part of it.
Which doesn't mean that the way we work it now isn't worthwhile.
No. I mean, we continue doing what we do, but
we have to realize that it isn't what it was intended, what it should be until. It's hard to say until we can do it fully.
Yeah, I mean, my fear is that if we keep going as we're going, we may dilute that very thing that is so precious to us, because we can't. It's difficult to recreate on the screen the experiences that we have in the room. We do really well, and there's some things that we do that are very different from the usual meetings, but that core shift, that community and connection that we build together is extraordinarily difficult to recreate. And maybe we, rather than trying to do that, which I fear I may have been in danger of trying to find a way of doing that whilst we're on screen, maybe then we just release ourselves from that and think, well, actually, that's until we can get, and we will get in a room together at some point, surely, to goodness. And won't that be a special occasion? Until that happens, we find another way of bringing an essence of the community, of the action, of the pragmatism, of the connection. We find a way of doing that has meaning, but isn't attempting in some way to try to recreate too much of what we've done before. So with that differentiation that Mark was talking about, that we can be, or Wayne, sorry, we can be clearer about that what each of these things offers in this kind of way, but we continue to create community in the way that the GRLI can, and taking Ramina's point, also expanding it so that there is more opportunities for people who other organizations that would otherwise not be able to attend. That's what I think I'm picking up here.
It has been great to see people, such a broad array of people online, because as was just said, I don't think everyone could have traveled to get together. But this is, so yeah, they're just different things.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, Anne's had to go, John.
John, would it be worthwhile to just say a few words to John about the 30 plus 30, having other organizations joining GRLI as such? Because that doesn't really have anything to do with the cohort, but it's about enriching the community and going back to some of the great experience we had in the early days from having corporate participants as well, for instance, and from public side as well. Just bring that diversity into the learning that we need to do. That we thought was very so it's a different issue. And that's
there was a very short period of time at the very outset of the GRLI, John, where sorry, Claire, you wanted to add something? Oh, someone else needs to.
Yeah, Wendy needs to go. I'm wondering if we perhaps need to.
Yeah, let's maybe. Yeah, Wendy, is there anything you want to share before you need to dial off?
No, I had really great conversations in the small breakout with Kathy, Hannah, and John. I'm supportive of whatever we decide as a group. I'm happy to participate and really appreciate the continued evolution of the group. Okay. I do hope I get to see you in person.
Of course. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks,
Wendy.
Yeah, so just very briefly, so there was a brief period of time right at the outset of the GRLI, John, where it was almost nearly equally balanced between business schools and companies. But it was, I mean, by the time I got involved on a part-time basis in 2009, it was no longer the case. Many people that came before me into the GRLI spoke of, how wonderful it was that we had that balance, but it seemed like it was a difficult one to maintain. So going forward, and whilst we are now the majority of our full partners are business schools, the intention with adding 5 additional full partners would be to develop relationships and eventually partner with organizations that are not necessarily business schools. So for instance, the Montessori group that focuses more on early childhood development and brings a different perspective on, kind of transforming learning towards global responsibility. So we're opening 5 spaces on the partner group specifically with a view to having a more diverse perspective on the inquiry that we hold. And the activity like, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the courageous conversations, the partner pods, the AGM itself, that stands above and beyond the Dean's Cohort as it originally developed. So the Dean's Cohort was almost kind of like a little satellite initiative, which then kind of grew, you know, to a point where I think at the end of last year, we had more than 70 people involved in some form or another, or kind of associating themselves with the cohort, even though they were not necessarily part of the GRLI. So what we're actually thinking now is maybe, you know, those who associated with the cohort this year, but that are not partners or associates, which all of you are, by the way, that those who, you know, I'm thinking now, you know, Watson from India, Baylor, you know, Colorado State University, Boulder, etc., to invite them to become associate partners of the GRLI, which would be kind of a stepping stone to maybe becoming partners in the future. But maybe not doing an intake of cohort participants until we have either an opportunity to meet face to face, but that if we have a cohort meeting, a Dean's Cohort meeting, that an institutional organization that is not currently an associate or partner of the GRLI would basically sign up for that meeting. And then maybe we can do something, and again, this is coming back to what I was kind of thinking aloud earlier, is maybe we have a round table, maybe once a year or so, Chatham House rules, more along the lines, I think, Mark, of what you have in mind. You know, how do I deal with the institutional pressures? You know, my DVC or the rector or whatever it is in your particular you know, region, that, you know, that you're having the organization, the institutional politics that you have to deal with, the, you know, faculty management that, you know, that you want to discuss with another dean, you know, things like your positioning and kind of external positioning of your school that you want to test with some other deans, you know, yeah, but not to make it, again, not to make it exclusive, but to make it purpose built for a safe space conversation for a dean with other deans. And similarly for, you know, we could do the same for center directors if we need to. But the kind of activity I think that we've had in the Dean's Cohort increasingly over the last year or so, much of that I feel, you know, there are associates and partners in the GRLI that would benefit from that as well. So let's not contain that only to the cohort. Let's kind of bring the cohort's work into the GRLI more broadly. And then if and when opportunity arises and we can have a dean's, you know, an in-person deans and directors cohort meeting again, then we kind of reset it, and, you know, we ask people for their whole person biography, what it is they want to work on, and we kind of reset it from there. So that's kind of where my head's at right now. But again, you know, in the remaining 10 minutes we have, would love to hear kind of any other thoughts or ideas that we have, because we'll obviously take this away and come back to you all in January.
Definitely. Before going there, John, I just wanted to add that the cohort that we have right now, which has met and is connected, which do have relations that go deeper and are genuinely there and are used and of value and functioning, you know, fully. Let's keep that. Let's keep that.
Yeah.
But expanding and moving on and believing that we're going to be able to regenerate the old without meeting face to face, I think that's fooling ourselves a little bit, right? But keep on delivering the value that it has for us right here and now would be very worthwhile. That's where I am. Yeah. So we have a core which is there, but how can we move forward? How can we move forward without diluting the value of the original way of operating and meeting?
Could I just add, though, that if the people who are actually deans wanted to meet together, whether it be either online before they can get together to meet face to face, if that was something that was of use to them and of interest to them to discuss dean stuff, as you said, John, that would seem to me would make sense if that's what they wanted to do. I don't think it wouldn't offend me, for example, if a group of deans wanted to meet to discuss dean stuff and I wasn't there or wasn't invited. That wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't feel that I was, you know, not part of the team anymore. The same as at some point in the future, there may be another group, a subgroup that might be set up for corporates to discuss with each other or other people or whatever.
Yeah. Romina, what do you, thanks, John. Romina's.
Just got a question. So the Deans and Directors cohort that we have had, you know, in the various locations, am I to understand that this is not just restricted to GRLI partners and associates? So we've had a bigger group.
Yeah.
And could you explain like how that happened, or is there a benefit to that?
Well, it was like that actually from the outset. So when Julia hosted the first meeting, there were kind of, you know, deans that she and other GRI deans knew through their kind of networking that they felt would, you know, that they would benefit from having their input at the meetings, but that they also wanted to get closer to the GRLI's kind of work. So, you know, I mean, I think, for instance, Hannah came to the first cohort meeting, not as a GRLI partner, but as, you know, someone that was invited to join the Dean's cohort, and subsequently became a GRLI partner. So that's of great value. And of course, Javiskal has done some really interesting work since being involved in the cohort. And then and then I think it was in the second or the third meeting, Romina, where we said there would be, in fact, Porto, which hosted the third meeting, was it, or the fourth meeting, was not a GRLI partner either, but had been part of the cohort again since the outset. And the idea was that they would bring deans that are not only in business schools. So we had some deans from health sciences in Vermont, and we had some deans from natural sciences in Porto and engineering. But that was something again that came out of the cohort. So that was not, you know, that was not something which the GRLI kind of core team initiated. That was you know, that was an impetus from the dean's cohort itself. And then as things transitioned to becoming more virtual, we had a number of people say, I want to join the cohort. So we created, I think in 2020, what we did is we charged the once-off fee for taking part in some of the meetings. That's just a small fee, I think it was. And then in 2021, because we knew we were going to have 3 meetings, institutions like Watson, Baylor, Colorado, etc., said, you know, because it's the dean plus 2 learning partners, they would then kind of contribute an annual cohort participation fee. But it's becoming, you know, I think it's becoming a little bit, as we see now, it's becoming a little bit blurred. So I would, you know, the more I think about it, the more I think we should really encourage those that really feel that they're part of the cohort to join the GRLI as associate partners, and be fully in you know, whatever activities the GRLI is undertaking, until such time that we can maybe reset the cohort kind of rhythm. So, Romina, does that make sense? I don't know if I'm answering your question, because I'm picking up.
Yeah, no, you are, and thank you so much for that explanation. I think, I mean, if we are going to move forward, I really like the idea of saying that the cohort belongs to GRLI, because there are some things that are talked about that are and then there's consistency of who's there, and some of the projects have moved forward, you know, which kind of makes sense to me, that this would be part of why we joined the GRLI, is that and so bringing in people who are not, or maybe remotely, or maybe doing it, I mean, they can make a commitment and say, we're going to join as an associate. If we like it, we'll become a full partner, or some kind of stepping stone, so that the cohort belongs to those of us who are all in with
All in.
GRLI in so many different ways, right? Because this is where I get the most benefit, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts on that?
I just wanted to say, I like your, following John's point about the example dean topics. I think the unique element of this cohort is you can discuss those dean topics with like-minded deans. So because you can go to the AEACSB deans and discuss those topics, but there's the full spectrum of deans and that don't necessarily share the values of people here. And I think that there's something that's something that's unique, and I think it's the sort of responsible management of faculty or responsible engagement with your mother institution or positioning on those things. So that's the, I don't know if it's the crossover of GRLI and deans. That's the thing.
No,
Thanks.
That's a good point. Thanks, Mark. Maybe just before we wrap up, any final just thoughts from anyone else before we move to a close, because we're coming up to the half hour, and I know that some of you need to dial off. I just want to look around and see if anyone.
A question. I have a question.
Oh, you have a question. Okay, and there's.
No, but I'm just waiting to hear it.
No. Okay, looks like you have an opportunity to ask a question.
Okay, quickly then. What we've done now, we've begun to shape a route towards 22, 23, right? But we only started. And thank you so much for being,
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Fully on board. But being very practical or pragmatic or explicit, whatever word is correct. How do you see next year play out for the cohort? A gathering in revisit an institution. Or should we just build on what we've heard now, take that with us, and you're on board the process now, so you can't go away from it. You're with us, which is the way we should operate, by the way. Anyway, so I shouldn't say just thank you. I should say, it comes natural. But we started, right? So maybe it's too early to say how it's going to play out.
Hannah made a very good point, I thought, in our group discussion that we had, in that, it's very difficult in these times, and maybe ever in the future, to be thinking about, strategic plans. It has to be emergent, and just, we have to be much more on our toes and just go with the flow when it happens. And I think that's how the initiative for the collaboration on the sustainability project worked out. So, I mean, that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't plan and shouldn't, but I think we have to be on our toes and ready to change direction whenever.
Yeah, agreed. Right. And the plan, if I'm right, John, is that we take the thoughts and the recommendations and suggestions from today, and then the three of us will work on them, and then we'll come back in January and
we'll play it
back. Okay, great.
Yeah. But what I'm also hearing, what I'm taking away is that in terms of going back to those who've engaged in the cohort over the last year but are not formally associated to the GRLI institutionally, that we encourage them to become associate partners.
Looks like that's a really strong.
Because I think that's
strongly supported.
That makes sense. Thank you very much, everyone. If there's anything else whatsoever that you'd like to put on, kind of on the agenda, or any thoughts or ideas, please. Oh, that's very festive there. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Claire or Anders. And if I don't see you again, then I hope you all have a wonderful festive period and some time of rest and recovery and meaningful connection. So it's wonderful to see you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a safe, peaceful
Happy healthy 22 as well.
You too.
All the best.